I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd install hidden cameras in my own son's home. But at 63 years old, standing in his pristine kitchen at 3 in the morning, listening to muffled sobbing coming from beneath my feet, I realized some lines demand to be crossed. My name is Margaret Fletcher, and 6 months ago, my son Derek called me with what seemed like a reasonable request. His wife Sarah had just been promoted to senior partner at her law firm. Their 2 kids were struggling with the transition to a new school, and they needed help. Could I move into their basement suite for a while? Just until things settled down? I'd been rattling around my small apartment in Winnipeg since my husband Tom passed away 2 years prior. The chance to be useful again, to be near my grandchildren, 8-year-old Lucas and 6-year-old Emma, felt like a lifeline. I packed my bags within a week. The house in their upscale Toronto neighborhood was impressive. 4 bedrooms, a finished basement, perfectly manicured lawn. Derek had done well for himself as an investment banker. Sarah was brilliant, driven, everything you'd want in a daughter-in-law. On the surface, they were the picture of success. But success, I've learned, can hide the darkest secrets. The first week was normal enough. I'd make breakfast for the kids while Derek and Sarah rushed through their morning routines. I'd pick Lucas and Emma up from school, help with homework, prepare dinner. They seemed like typical children, maybe a bit quieter than I remembered from Derek's childhood, but nothing alarming. It was the second Tuesday night when I first heard it. I'd gone upstairs around 11 to grab a glass of water. The house was dark, everyone supposedly asleep. But as I passed the hallway leading to what Derek called his home office, I heard voices, low, tense, urgent. "They're not performing well enough." That was Derek's voice, clipped and cold. "We've increased the study time to 4 hours on weeknights, 5 on weekends." Sarah's voice was defensive. "It's not enough. Lucas got an 87% on his math test. That's unacceptable. Emma's reading level is still only at grade 6. I froze. Emma was in grade A1. "What do you want me to do?" Sarah sounded exhausted. "We discussed this. The basement protocol. It's the only thing that works." My hand tightened on the glass. Basement protocol? What on earth were they talking about? I retreated quietly, my mind racing. Perhaps I'd misunderstood. Perhaps they were talking about some new educational method. But the tone of that conversation, the clinical coldness of it, sat in my stomach like a stone. The next day, I paid closer attention. Lucas came home from school with a spelling test, 92%. I congratulated him warmly, expecting pride. Instead, his face crumpled. "Grandma, please don't tell Dad," he whispered, tears pooling in his eyes. "Sweetheart, this is wonderful work." "No, it's not. It's not 100. He'll send me down again." "Down where?" But Lucas wouldn't say another word, just took his backpack and disappeared into his room. That night, I stayed awake. At exactly 2:30 in the morning, I heard footsteps on the stairs. I cracked my basement door open just enough to see. Derek was leading Lucas, who was in his pajamas and crying silently, down the hallway. I heard a door open, then close. A lock clicked. I waited 5 minutes, then crept upstairs. The house was silent. I followed the sound of that lock to a door I'd assumed was a storage closet. I tried the handle, locked from the outside. I pressed my ear against the door. Nothing at first, then a small, hitching sob. "Lucas?" I whispered. "Honey, it's Grandma." A shuffle, then his voice, tiny and afraid. "Grandma, please don't let them know you're here. It'll be worse." "What's happening? Why are you locked in there?" I got a question wrong on my homework. 3 hours for each mistake. That's the rule. My blood turned to ice. 3 hours locked in a closet? It's not a closet. It's the punishment room. There's a desk, a chair, a light. We have to study the material until they let us out. We? Emma's been down here too. She had to stay 6 hours last week because she couldn't remember her times tables fast enough. I stood there, hand pressed against that door, rage and horror warring inside me. This was my son, the boy I'd raised to be kind, to be fair, to be loving. What had he become? I went back to my room, but I didn't sleep. At 6 in the morning, I heard the lock turn, heard Derek's voice. "You may come out now." I expect perfect scores from this point forward. At breakfast, Lucas sat silently, eyes hollow with exhaustion. Emma was already at the table, picking at her cereal. Neither child spoke unless spoken to. Sarah scrolled through her phone, barely acknowledging them. Derek read the financial news on his tablet. This wasn't a family. This was a training facility. I spent that day in town. I visited a small electronics store and explained to the young man behind the counter that I was worried about my elderly mother being alone in her home. Could he recommend a discreet monitoring system? He sold me 3 small wireless cameras, showed me how to connect them to my phone, how to access the recordings. That night, after everyone was asleep, I installed them. One in the hallway near the punishment room, one in the kitchen where I'd overheard that first terrible conversation, one in the living room where I'd noticed Derek often debriefed the children after school. For 3 days, I watched and listened. What I discovered made me physically ill. Derek had a point system. Every test, every quiz, every homework assignment was graded. Anything below 95% resulted in basement time. But it wasn't just academic. I watched him quiz Emma on vocabulary words at dinner. When she hesitated on the word perseverance, he made her write it 500 times before bed. She was 6 years old. I watched Sarah time Lucas as he completed math problems. If he took longer than her predetermined schedule, he lost screen time, outdoor play, dessert. One evening, I watched Lucas ask if he could play with a friend from school. Derek's response was chilling. You may have friends when you've earned them. Right now, your only focus should be excellence. But the worst, the absolute worst, came on Friday night. Emma had brought home a project from school, a simple poster about her favorite animal. She'd drawn a butterfly with crayons, written a few basic facts. By any reasonable standard, it was age-appropriate, creative, sweet. Derek looked at it for exactly 10 seconds. This is unacceptable. The coloring is sloppy. The handwriting is barely legible. You didn't include scientific classification. Emma's lip trembled. But Miss Patterson said, I don't care what your teacher said. In this family, we have standards. He tore the poster in half. Emma began to cry. Go to the punishment room. 4 hours. When you come out, you'll redo this properly. Derek, she's exhausted. I couldn't stay silent anymore. She's been at school all day, she has. Mother, this is not your concern. We are raising high achievers. This is what it takes. This is child abuse. The room went silent. Sarah looked up from her phone, eyes wide. Derek's face turned to stone. That's an extremely serious accusation. Because it's extremely serious behavior. You're traumatizing these children. I'm preparing them for a competitive world. Something you clearly don't understand, given your generation's permissive approach to parenting. I raised you with love and discipline, not fear and isolation. And look how I turned out. Successful, driven, everything you should be proud of. I'm horrified, I said quietly. Derek stood. Perhaps it's time for you to find alternative accommodation. Emma was still crying. Lucas sat frozen, eyes fixed on his plate. Sarah said nothing. I went down to my basement room and pulled out my phone. I scrolled through 3 days of footage. Derek berating Lucas for a minor spelling error. Sarah conducting timed drills at 10 p.m. Emma locked in that room for 6 hours straight, with nothing but worksheets and a bottle of water. Lucas flinching when Derek raised his voice. I also found something else while reviewing the footage. The living room camera had captured Derek on his laptop, and I'd zoomed in. Financial documents. He was embezzling from his own clients, moving money through shell accounts. The pressure he was putting on his children wasn't just about their success. It was about maintaining the illusion of his own perfection while his professional life crumbled. The man was unraveling, and he was taking his children down with him. I waited until Saturday afternoon when Derek and Sarah went out for a business lunch. I sat both children down in the living room. I need you to be very brave and very honest with me, I said gently. How long has this been happening? Lucas looked at Emma. Some silent communication passed between them. Since we moved here, Lucas finally said. 2 years ago. Dad got a new job, and he said we had to be perfect so people would respect us. It was just extra homework at first, then the rules got stricter, then the punishment room. Have they ever hurt you physically? No, Emma said quickly. They're not like that. They just lock us away, and they say mean things. Dad says if we're not the best, we're worthless. Does anyone at school know? Lucas shook his head. We're not allowed to tell anyone. Dad said if we did, he'd send us to military school. We'd never see you or our friends or anything we love again. I pulled both children into my arms. Listen to me very carefully. What your parents are doing is wrong. It is not normal, it is not acceptable, and it is not your fault. You are not worthless. You are bright, kind, wonderful children, and you deserve to feel safe in your own home. What are we going to do? Emma whispered. I'm going to fix this, I promised. That evening, I made copies of every video file. I documented every incident with timestamps and descriptions. I photographed the punishment room when Derek and Sarah were watching a movie upstairs. It was exactly as Lucas had described. A small, windowless space, a single desk and chair, shelves lined with workbooks and practice tests, a timer on the wall, a lock on the outside of the door. On Sunday morning, I called the Children's Aid Society. I explained the situation calmly and thoroughly. They said they'd send someone within 24 hours. Sunday afternoon, I called my lawyer in Winnipeg, a woman I'd known for 30 years. I explained everything. She connected me with a family law specialist in Toronto. Sunday evening, I called my sister Patricia in Vancouver. I told her what I'd discovered and asked if Lucas and Emma could stay with her temporarily if needed. She agreed immediately. Monday morning, the social worker arrived. Her name was Jennifer Kowalski, and she was exactly the kind of person you'd want in a crisis. Calm, professional, but with kind eyes. I showed her everything. The videos, the photographs, the room. I told her about the point system, the isolation, the psychological pressure. She took notes, asked questions, and assured me this would be investigated thoroughly. Derek and Sarah came home from work at 6. They found Jennifer sitting in their living room with me. What's going on? Derek's voice was tight. Jennifer identified herself and explained she was there to assess the children's welfare following a report of emotional abuse and confinement. Sarah went pale. Derek's face flushed red. This is absurd. We're raising our children with high standards. That's not abuse. Locking children in a room for hours as punishment, denying them social interaction, creating an atmosphere of fear and constant pressure crosses the line from discipline into abuse, Jennifer said calmly. I need to interview Lucas and Emma privately. She did, for over an hour. I could hear Emma crying at one point. My heart broke. When she emerged, her face was grave. I'm placing these children in temporary care, pending a full investigation. They'll stay with their grandmother, Margaret Fletcher, who has agreed to be their guardian during this process. You can't do that. Derek stepped forward. There are children. I can and I am. You'll receive formal notice tomorrow. We'll also be coordinating with Toronto Police Service, as some of the conditions described may constitute criminal neglect. Sarah finally spoke. Derek, maybe we should. Be quiet, he snapped at her. That's when I knew. Sarah wasn't the mastermind. She was another victim, too afraid of Derek to stand up for her own children. Over the next weeks, the truth came tumbling out. The investigation expanded when my evidence about Derek's financial crimes reached the proper authorities. He'd embezzled over $300,000 from client accounts, using the money to maintain their lavish lifestyle while his actual investments tanked. The pressure on his children was projection. If they were perfect, if they succeeded where he'd failed, he could still feel like the successful man he pretended to be. Sarah was offered a deal. Testify against Derek, seek therapy, demonstrate commitment to her children's welfare, and she'd avoid charges. She took it. In her statement, she admitted she'd known the discipline was excessive, but felt powerless to stop it. Derek had controlled every aspect of their family life, including her. Derek was not so fortunate. He was charged with criminal neglect, child confinement, and multiple counts of embezzlement and fraud. The trial lasted 3 months. Lucas and Emma didn't have to testify, thank God. The video evidence and statements from school counselors who'd noticed the children's anxiety but hadn't been told the cause were sufficient. He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison, no early release. The judge made it clear that using one's position of trust to harm vulnerable children warranted the harshest consequences. Sarah received 2 years probation, mandatory therapy, and supervised visitation once the children were ready. She lost her law license. I received permanent custody of Lucas and Emma. We moved back to Winnipeg. I sold my small apartment and bought a modest house with a backyard. Nothing fancy, but it has something Derek and Sarah's mansion never had: warmth, laughter, safety. The first few months were hard. Lucas had nightmares. Emma was afraid to make any mistakes, even small ones like spilling juice. They'd flinch when I raised my voice, even just to call them for dinner from another room. We started therapy, all 3 of us. I learned about childhood trauma, about creating secure attachments, about letting children just be children. They learned that love isn't conditional on performance, that home is a place of rest, not constant evaluation. Slowly, carefully, we healed. Lucas is 10 now. He still likes school, but he's allowed to get B's and C's if he's tried his best. He's on a soccer team. He has friends over for sleepovers. Last month, he told me he wanted to be a veterinarian, and I told him that was wonderful, and I meant it, even though Derek would have scoffed that it wasn't prestigious enough. Emma is 8. She draws butterflies constantly, each one more creative than the last. Her room is covered in them. She takes dance classes and performs in recitals where she sometimes forgets the steps and has to improvise, and she comes off stage beaming because she had fun, and that's what matters. I'm 65 now. Some days my arthritis acts up and I move a little slower, but I've never felt more purposeful. I get to watch my grandchildren grow into themselves, not into someone else's impossible expectations. Sarah visits once a month. The kids are still guarded around her, but they're trying. She's different now, softer, more present. She cries sometimes when she watches them play. I think she's mourning the years she lost, the mother she could have been. I feel pity for her more than anger now. Derek sends letters from prison. I don't let the children read them. They're full of justifications, rationalizations, claims that everyone overreacted. There's no remorse, no understanding of what he did. Perhaps there never will be. But that's not my burden to carry anymore. People sometimes ask me if I have regrets, if I wish I'd handled things differently. The answer is no. The moment I heard Lucas crying behind that locked door, there was only one choice, the right one. I think about other grandparents, other family members who might suspect something's wrong but stay silent. Maybe they think it's not their place. Maybe they're afraid of causing family conflict. Maybe they tell themselves that strict parenting, even harsh parenting, is better than neglect. I want them to know this. If you see a child suffering, you have a moral obligation to act. Family loyalty doesn't mean protecting abusers. It means protecting the most vulnerable members of your family from harm, even if that harm comes from within. The hardest conversations are sometimes the most necessary. The most painful interventions are sometimes the most loving. I saved 2 children by risking everything. My relationship with my son is destroyed beyond repair. Some extended family members think I betrayed Derek, aired private family matters publicly. But when I tuck Lucas and Emma into bed each night, when I see them laugh freely, when Emma brings me another butterfly drawing, when Lucas tells me about his day without fear in his eyes, I know I made the right choice. Love isn't just patience and kindness. Sometimes love is steel and fire. Sometimes love is standing between a child and harm, no matter who's causing that harm. I'm their grandmother, but more than that, I'm their guardian, and I'll never stop fighting for them. If there's one lesson I hope others take from my story, it's this. Perfection is a cage, and children need room to grow, to fail, to learn, to simply be. The pressure to achieve, to perform, to be exceptional can become a kind of prison. We must raise children who are resilient, not brittle, kind, not ruthless, whole, not fractured under impossible expectations. And if you're a child reading this somehow, know this: You are enough exactly as you are. Your worth isn't measured in test scores or achievements. You deserve to be loved for who you are, not what you accomplish. Stand up. Speak out. Trust that there are adults in the world who will listen, who will believe you, who will fight for you. I was one of them, and I always will be.